Hi everyone, we're here at John Sadler's Auto Repair. And this is a follow-up video of our 2003 Dodge Dakota that shuts off whenever it feels like it. So in the last video I showed you some of the alarm wires and some of the things underneath the dash. This is all the alarm system that I took out underneath the dash. And you can see it's got connections everywhere. This was the relay I was telling you that was all taped up inside of here that was getting too hot. It's supposed to get warm, but it was getting really hot. Here's all the connectors that they had on the vehicle. And so what we use is a connector, and this connector, when you heat it up with a heat gun, this shrinks around it, and it has a sealer that comes out, so it makes a good connection, and that's what we used on the one wire that they cut too short. So if we go inside the vehicle, here's where they had a lot of things hooked in down on the side here. So I individually taped each one, then cleaned the harness up here. Then over here, they had a lot of wires hooked in here where you can see I cleaned it up, retaped it, and then I put a crimp connector on here, and then crimped this, and then put a new piece of wire inside of here because they had cut it too short. So that's how it's supposed to look now. All nice and cleaned up, no extra wires hanging around. So I got all done with that part, and then I turned the ignition key off, and in the vehicle the key just came out. So when you put the key in the ignition and turn the ignition, the key should not just come out in any position. The key should only go in and out when it's in the run position. You know, the key should not come out until you go to the off position and it's locked. Well, I can go anywhere and the key comes out. So we have no idea what position this tumbler's in. I talked to Quick Key Locksmith here in San Diego, and they told me that this can make the vehicle shut off. So we replace this. Now when you start it, I put the key in the ignition, I just turn it a little bit. The key does not come out. The key stays in the ignition like it's supposed to stay. Okay? So now we're going to go ahead and start the vehicle up, but first we're going to turn the key on with the engine off. And what we're doing is we're watching our fuel pressure gauge over here, and you can see it went up some and then it went back down to 0 again. So I'm going to cycle the key, and then we'll keep the camera pointed on the gauge, and you'll watch it, the gauge starts to build pressure. So I'm going to cycle the key off and on again. I'm going to cycle off and on again. So you see how the pressure is bleeding back off like that? The pressure should come up and stay up. So when she goes to start it for the first time in the morning and it doesn't want to start, you have to do a long extended crank time. Well, something with the fuel pump is failing. So now we're going to go ahead and start it. So that proves that it's not holding pressure when it's supposed to, and sometimes it will hold a little bit of pressure, so the pump is just failing. It hasn't failed completely, but it's failing as far as the first initial time that you used it. So now I'm going to go ahead and start it up. So as you can see, we got about 62 PSI. So we're supposed to have 55 to 60. So we're in the range of the fuel pressure we're supposed to have, and the fuel pressure staying steady. Another test you can do, if you think you have a bad fuel pump or a weak fuel pump, is you can bleed some fuel off with the engine idling. And when the engine's idling like this right now, it should stay idling just like this when I relieve the fuel pressure. So let's see what happens. So I relieve the pressure. The motor sounds exactly the same. The motor RPM is not changed. We've got a good amount of fuel coming out of our hose right there. So we have plenty of fuel volume. So the pump is able to produce the right amount of pressure, the right amount of volume. It's just when you first initially start it, when that pump gets going in the beginning, the pressure goes up, pressure goes down, and that's why the first time she goes to start it during the day, the vehicle does not want to start. It takes 10 or 15 seconds of cranking time. If you cycle the key off and on 3 or 4 times, then start it, it works fine. And then throughout the day when she uses it, it works fine once the pump has initially been activated. So the pump is physically starting to wear out, but it hasn't failed yet. So the other problem she came in for is she said in parking lots and going slow, making a left or right turn, the vehicle would die down and it would shut off. So we found another problem. when I was test driving the vehicle and driving in parking lots and driving in slow areas, if you turn the steering wheel, apply the brake, activate the power steering, and activate the air conditioning, the engine RPM is supposed to change, supposed to come up a little bit. This is called an idle air control unit, and it mounts right here on the lower part, the side of the throttle body. And as you can see how the throttle body is nice and clean here, well, this was all black. We cleaned this, and then when I took this idle control unit out, if you look inside that control unit, you can see where it's all black inside there, and there's actually a piece of carbon or debris in that top corner, that little ledge there. You can see there's nothing else on there, but there's another piece of material that's actually stuck inside there. And that's not supposed to be all black like that inside. So the problem that she had with the vehicle driving and doing left and right turns and driving slow, going to parking lots and things like that, was the idle air control unit. So and then I also replaced the relay. In the first video, we showed this was the relay for the engine controls, and it was just constantly going click, 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 click like crazy. So I replaced this relay, and the vehicle worked good for 3 or 4 more days. And then I was coming up to my gate, and I was at a complete stop, and the vehicle shut off. So one of the things that will make it do that is the crankshaft position sensor. So every step of the way, we removed the alarm, things got better, we changed the ignition switch, then we did the relay, then things worked good. When I changed the idle control, the idle's been very stable ever since we put this on. So the only issue we don't know is why it shut off when we're on the freeway. So now we're going to go to the crankshaft sensor and look at the waveform pattern. And what I did, I put a little label on the computer here for the crank sensor. It's pin 35 on connector 2 on the engine control computer. And it's going to be this terminal where we're going to hook into. So, I'm going to crimp that on there like that. I'm going to hook this up to our meter. Hook this side to ground. Because the crankshaft sensor is mounted below the vehicle, so there's no way that you can get to it unless you have the vehicle up on a lift. And it's pretty hard to watch the sensor and diagnose things when you have that going on. So what we're going to do is a signature test on the crankshaft sensor. It's supposed to look like this. And so here's what we have. And one of the things I want to show you too is this sensor also has a frequency test. And when the engine's idling, it should have about 80 to 250 hertz, and we have 360, 370. And you see how it went back down to 120? Went back down to 120 again. Now you see that little glitch, that little line right there? That's not supposed to be there. Let's see if we can catch that again one time. See that line right there? That little gap, that small little gap, that's a failing in that sensor. So we know that's acting up. And then we're going to go back to it's called a signature test of the waveform pattern. And there's our waveform pattern. Now, as I accelerate the engine and change the RPM, you watch the pattern will change also. And so the pattern on the waveform has stayed pretty consistent every time I checked it. But there's more than one way to test this sensor, and that's why if we back up again, and we go to our frequency test, and we see how it's supposed to be between 120 and 150, or I mean 120 and 250, and we got the 366, 320, you know how it's changing around like that? That's too much of a change. And see, I don't see that little dropout happening again yet, but I watched it for like an hour before and it kept changing. See, that one time it went down to 37. See, it went down to 120 again. So now if you look at our fuel pressure again, it's been running, 5 minutes here or so. Stay nice and stable. We got 60 PSI. We give it some acceleration. We got good stable fuel pressure. On deceleration, the fuel drops down a little bit because it has an automatic cutoff on the system. Whereas you decelerate, it cuts the fuel down. So the pump is going bad. So when she complains about when she first tried to start it, that's the problem with the long crank time. Driving in parking lots and little small areas, when she has to turn left or right, this idle air control was not doing its job, because when you activate the power steering, when you activate the air conditioning, the RPM is supposed to raise. The RPM did not change at all. So when we went to this idle controller, I showed you inside of it where it was all black and it had a piece of debris physically stuck in it. So that's the problem with that. I believe the problem when you're driving on the freeway is the crankshaft position sensor is failing on the Hertz part of it, but I can't make it fail right now. But I can prove by this video that it should not jump around from 120 to 360. It should jump around from 120 to 250 at the most. It should not have that little dropout whatsoever in there. So this has been a super difficult job to figure out. We also ran the BG fuel injection cleaner through here. That's why that's clean now, because that was all black and full of soot. We added this to the gas tank because it depends where people buy gas now. A lot of the gas is no good. This helps the fuel injection spray pattern when it's going through the fuel system. Then this air intake cleaner does just what it does. It says it cleans the air intake, and that's why the air intake is actually clean now. Then this other treatment cleans the back of the intake valve. She thought the truck ran good before. I thought it ran okay. Now it runs great. The customers indicated they don't want this vehicle anymore. I kind of found that out halfway into working on it from another party that bought the vehicle over here. But I want to show you that, then I had a vacuum hose on the top of the throttle body here. See that big split right here? So when you put it on the throttle body, where it connects right here, the split is right where this connects. And so it had a hissing air bypass sound all the time, so you're leaking 20 inches of vacuum is also leaking there. So as you drive the vehicle, if that hose flexes or things change, that changes too. So the reason I made this video is to do a follow-up on this vehicle is when the customer's friend is telling me, well, can't you just fix it? Just give it back to us, just fix it. Well, so far, I found, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'll show you the crankshaft sensor. 7. This mounts in the bottom of the bell housing, and this O-ring is to protect dirt and debris from getting inside there. Then it has the sensor part inside there. There's a 3-wire sensor with a signal back output that we're looking at, and a 5-volt reference going in, and a ground. So I'm going to replace this sensor on my own time and my own money, and then I'm going to give the vehicle back to the customer. And I hope that everybody that watches this understands that technicians as myself, that we really want to do a great job for you. We really want to solve the problem. And then when the consumer doesn't appreciate whatsoever what we're doing, it just says, how come it's not done? Can't you just put a part on there and fix it? Won't the scan tool tell you what's wrong with it? As I showed in my first video, there was no scan tool information that there was any fault at all in this vehicle. It was only by dynamic testing under load, driving it myself, having things happen to it, that there was a problem with it. And unless I took this alarm system out, how am I supposed to diagnose it any further? If I can take the key out in any position, so the ignition switch, the electrical part behind here, has no idea what position it's in, how am I supposed to diagnose anything else? If this relay's been clipping for 10 years like the customer complains, since she's owned the vehicle new, how am I supposed to trust that? This is pretty obvious. It has a split and it's broken up. Why you can't trust that? So at that point, the customer was pretty much done. I went ahead on this idle control on my own and opened it up to show you the piece of debris and how black it's in there. You can see how stable the motor's running now. The motor's running great. It's doing what it's supposed to do. And so I didn't mean to go on too long here this morning, but I want you to show you how tough these things are to figure out. They're not easy at all. And thank you very much. I hope you wish you all a nice day. Bye.